Let's implement a PHP library that will prevent open redirect vulnerabilities. For this, let's refer to Facebook's link shim. First, let's notice the link shim's behavior on the following URLs. In the first one, we are redirected immediately to Oculus. We can see that the domain oculus.com is whitelisted since Oculus is owned by Facebook. For the second and third one, which are both google.com, we can see that we are shown a warning page. This is how FB treats google.com because google.com is a normal URL. But for the fourth and the fifth one, which are evilzone.com, an error page is shown because evilzone.com is a blacklisted domain in Facebook. In the sixth one, we can see that even subdomain.evilzone.com is blocked, which means that any subdomain of a blacklisted website is automatically blacklisted as well. In the seventh one, we can see the different Unicode characters are not handled by Facebook. Facebook automatically classifies links like this as invalid. This means that we don't need to handle the different Unicode characters. All we need to handle are the uppercase and mixed cases in the URLs and the IP addresses. Now, let's investigate further on how Facebook's link shim handles the different IP addresses notations. That's a lot of links, but only the URLs in number 10 and 11 are handled by Facebook. The rest of the alternative IP representations are classified by Facebook as invalid. In summary, here's our finding in Facebook's link shim. Unicodes like this don't work. They are treated as invalid. Domains are not case sensitive, which means evilzone.com and evilzone.com in mixed case are the same, that they are both blacklisted. Number 3, only the proper IPv4 and IPv6 IPv4 address embedding will work. Other alternative IP representations are classified as invalid. Now that we have the notes on how we want our library to function, let's make a flowchart for this. So this is the final flowchart. Here's the start. At first, we will check if it is a domain. Then the next thing that we need to check is if the address is a proper IPv4. If it is not a proper IPv4, we will check if it is an IPv6/IPv4 embedding. Otherwise, we will display that it is an invalid domain. Going back, if the link is a domain, we need to convert it to lowercase, so we can easily handle it when comparing to the blacklist or to the whitelist. Then, for the IPv6/IPv4 embedding, we need to convert it to the proper IPv4 format. After the domains and the IPs are simplified, we need to check if it is part of the blacklist. If it is blacklisted, we need to display an error. If it is part of the whitelisted, we need to redirect automatically the user. And if it's not part of the blacklist or the whitelist, we will treat it as a normal URL by displaying a warning modal. And that's it. That's the flowchart on how our Open Redirect library will work. Now, the next thing that we need to do is code it. Let's create a function called validateURL containing all the steps that we mentioned previously. This function will return a string with the values of either invalid, blacklisted, normal, or whitelisted. Let's start by creating an array of our blacklist and whitelisted domains. In the blacklist, I will add some domains such as evilzone.com, hacker.com, and phishingsite.com. And for the whitelist, I'll input facebook.com, oculus.com, the facebook.net, and Facebook's IP, which is 31.13.87.36. Let's start by creating the validateURL function. Here, the validateURL function will accept 3 parameters: the URL, the blacklist, and the whitelist. In this way, we can call the function validateURL by passing the URL, for example, https://google.com, then the array, the blacklist, and then the whitelist. The first thing that we need to do is to get the host name. This is either the domain or the IP address. We will get the host name by using the parse URL function in PHP. The first parameter is the URL, and the second parameter is the URL part that we need to get. In this case, the host. And we will be using PHP underscore URL underscore host. To make sure that this code is running, let's echo the $host and go to our browser to see if the $host is displayed properly. Since it works, let's proceed to the next step. We need to determine if the host is a domain or an IP. We will use pregmatch here. The pregmatch will check if the URL matches a certain pattern. That regular expression is kinda lengthy, but don't worry. You can always scan the QR code in the upper right side of your screen. In there, you will be redirected to a repository containing all the codes that we used throughout the course. Based on our flowchart previously, if the host is a domain, we must convert it to lowercase. Next is, we need to check if the host is a proper IP address. We will also use a regular expression for this. If it is an IP, then the $host will stay the same. Let's call the function one more time. But first, let's not forget to echo the host so we can see it in the web page. Let's change this to an IP address. And let's add another call to the function, this time with mixed cases. This is to ensure that our function is still working so far. And yes, it still works. The IP address is retained and the mixed case is converted to lowercase. Now, our only problem is for the IPv6/IPv4 embedded addresses. And we must handle both of these cases. The way that we will do this is by adding another condition. We will add a new pregmatch function. This regular expression can be seen in the repository also in the QR code above. Let's display something to ensure that the last pregmatch is working. Since the regular expressions kinda ruins the code formatting, let's move it outside the function so it will look cleaner. Now that it is outside the function, we need to import it using the global keyword, so we can still have access to it. Now that we identified successfully the IPv6/IPv4 embedding, we need to convert it to proper IPv4 address. Let's split the host by the colon symbol. After that, let's get the last element of the array. This will return the proper IPv4. Now let's check if our code works. It works. But wait, even the closing bracket is returned, so we need to strip this. We will use the rtrim function in PHP. This will trim all the closing brackets in the right side of the string. Now that this part of the code works, let's proceed to the next part, the blacklisting and whitelisting. This is easy. We just need to iterate through all the blacklist and the whitelisted domains. In comparing, we will use both pregmatch and pregquote. Pregquote will ensure that we will generate the right regular expression. Let's call the validate URL function one more time, so we can test it against the evilzone.com. Also, let's change this return first to an echo, so we can see the output in the website. It works. Evilzone.com is tagged as blacklisted. Now, we will just do the same for the whitelisted domains. Let's just copy this and change all the blacklist to whitelist. That's it. The blacklisting and whitelisting works. But wait, we're not finished yet. We need to change back the echo to return. And to also add a return normal for non-blacklisted or whitelisted URLs. Then we just add some echoes and line breaks. And that's all. We're finished. Or are we? If you haven't noticed, we have not yet tested our code against invalid links. Let's add these 3 lines containing invalid host names. And let's see. All the URLs are treated as normal, when in reality, Facebook treats them as invalid. So, how can we handle this? Let's go back to the condition above. All we need to do is to add an else and set the return to invalid. And that's all. Our open redirection prevention code works. Now that we have the validate URL function that accepts the parameters URL, blacklist, and whitelist, we still need to check it if it handles every URL stated in the previous lesson. So let's test it using the following code. All of these 3 must return normally. The first one is a Google URL that has a query of q is equal to dog. This will ensure that the parse URL in our PHP is working. The next 2 are both google.com. One is in small letters, and one is in mixed case. Meanwhile, all of these 6 test cases must all return whitelisted. Even the evilzone.com.facebook.com, because facebook.com is still the domain. On the other hand, all of these 3 test cases must return blacklisted, since all of the domains stated here are all evilzone.com. Now, let's go to the invalid ones. All of these 3 are invalid, because Facebook's link stream treats all of these URL as invalid. The decimal notation, the octal notation, and the hexadecimal notation. Full octal and full hexadecimal notations are considered invalid, as well as these 2 random notations. Full octal and full hexadecimal notations with random paddings are also considered invalid. Also these IPs with optional zeros. IP addresses with integer overflow are also considered invalid. And lastly, Unicode encoded characters like this are also considered invalid. Let's add some line breaks before running it so we can see the output cleanly. Finally, we confirm that our code works. You can see here the 3 normal, the 6 whitelisted, the 3 blacklisted, and the numerous invalid. That's it. Now it's your turn to modify this code and finish the labs. Good luck!